In this video, you're going to learn how to properly use Google Analytics reports and use some of the key features in those reports in order to manipulate the data. So to run through this, let us open up an overview report for our audience. In here, we can look at some of the key features that you're going to see on almost every report. And the first thing to look at is the date range in the top right-hand corner here. Right now, you can see that this is showing for the last 30 days, and the dates that are selected and shown in this report are highlighted in blue here. Now, you can change that if you want. We could look at just yesterday, last week, or even the last 7 days, and just apply that. And then this report and any other report that we look at is going to be limited to that date range. So let's just go back and set it to the last 30 days. And we can just click apply on that. Now, one thing to note about this is actually you can see today is not included, and that is because today is not yet over, so there isn't a full data set for them to include in that report. You can also use the compare to feature to get more insights into your data. So if I tick this, I can see that in this report I can look at and compare to the previous period. So let's apply this and see how it changes the data. Below then, we can see in orange, this is the previous period, and in blue now is the current period. So we're getting a comparison in this chart and a visualization of the change. And also down below here, if we look at our metrics, really now it's comparing the previous period or the current period to the previous period. So we can see that this month we have 6.87% more users compared to the previous period, and it'll also, as well as showing you increases in these metrics, show you anywhere where there's been a decrease. So for example, we're down 1.44% in average session duration, so the amount of time that people spend on the site when they visit. So it's a very handy feature of the reports if you just want to get a quick analysis on how we're doing compared to last month. And if you do want to deselect this comparison, you can just deselect it and hit apply. Now up here at the top, we also have the option to add a segment, and that gives us the option to add a subset of our data. We can build up that subset and really decide what that is going to be. It could be from a particular marketing channel, or particular demographic or country. Later on, I'll be showing you how to set these up, but there is that option to add these segments right at the top of every report. Now moving on a little bit further down, we're getting in to see the line graph here. And one thing to note is that this line graph is really now showing in terms of number of users. So we can see really this total figure here in the line graph representing the number of users. Now we can change that if we want to look at any of the other metrics, like say for example the bounce rate, or let's have a look at the average session duration. So it is important to note that this graph here really represents whatever metric is shown in this box here. So we can change that back to users anytime we want, or type anything in there if you want to find a particular metric. Now, looking across the line graph, we can see really day by day the number of users that were on the site. So we can see Saturday, 18th of November, just over 2,000. We can see yesterday, just over 9,000. So quite a range there, and that's interesting to see on a daily basis. We can also look at this graph on an hourly basis, or even a weekly basis if you just want to get that higher level view. Probably the most useful is just to leave it on a daily basis. And one cool thing about seeing it on a daily basis like this is that you can actually select one of the days, and you can also add a note in there. So you can use this annotations feature to add a note and maybe explain why there's been a peak in traffic like that. And I've added it before here. You can just type it in and click save. Perhaps it's at the start of a December sale, and that really explains that spike in traffic. And adding these little annotations can be very helpful if you're looking back on your own reports and you can't quite remember 3 months ago why you had a big spike in traffic. And by making these little notes, then you can really look at, okay, that really worked before, maybe I could do that again. Adding these annotations is also very useful if you are working with colleagues and you want to share that information for them or for clients, or if someone's taking over your role, at least they have a history and an explanation of these spikes or dips in traffic. So the annotations feature is very useful, and you can just add those in easily there underneath the line graph. So we've covered a lot here in the analytics or the audience overview report. We've touched on just the layout of some of these metrics. There's a graph here representing a comparison of new visitors versus returning visitors. And down here as well, if you want to change the information that's appearing in this table, you can just click on one of these links here, and it's going to show you, for example, the browser that was most popular over the last 30 days. We can see here it is Chrome with 68% of the users. So we'll go back now, and we're actually going to dive into a more advanced report so we can really look at how that is laid out also and some of the key features there. So we'll come down to the location report. You can see we still have our date range, the option to add those segments, and we have a graphical representation with one metric here as well. But really what we want to explain now is this data table and how you can navigate and use this and manipulate the data in here. So firstly, how is this table laid out? Well, it's very simple. We have attributes of our users here, like the countries that they're from. These are going to be in the rows of the data table. And in the columns of the data table, we have metrics related to those characteristics of our users. So we can see here that our users from the US, that's over 37,000 people in the last 30 days, representing 45% of our total users. So it's very simple the way these are laid out. We've got our rows, which are characteristics of our users, and the columns, which are the metrics for those individual characteristics. Now, the language that Google Analytics likes to use is dimensions for these characteristics of our users, and metrics for the metrics themselves. Now, it's important to note that right now we can see that the primary characteristic of this report here is country, but we can change that and look at this data table based on another characteristic like city. So we're now seeing the top cities of our users over the last 30 days, and you can change that to continent as well. You can also add in a secondary dimension if you want. So we could look at, for example, the browser that was used in the top city, which is Chrome. So the point is that you can add in secondary dimensions as well if you want to look at that and drill down further into your data. And if you want to remove those, you can just click that and it brings you back to that one primary dimension that you're looking at. Now the data table and the way this is laid out, right now it's sorted in terms of the top city and the users from that top city. If we wanted to change that, we could look at another column of data and really sort the table based on bounce rate and not on number of users. So right now we know that this table of data is sorted by users because of this little down arrow. But we could change this to be bounce rate, and all of a sudden you can see that the table of data has changed, and now we can see the cities with the top bounce rates. And if we want to extend the rows in this data table, we can go ahead and do that, and we can get a look at really more and more rows here. Now up at the top of these reports, we also have the option to visualize some of the data. So before we do this, I'll just come back to look at our country and also look at our number of users. And right now this little icon here means we're looking at the data table. That's what we're looking at now. We can also look at a pie chart and a breakdown of that. Sometimes it's very useful to look at that breakdown. We can also look at a bar chart if we want to see that type of visualization. And we can also see a comparison to the site average, which can be very useful, and we can look at different metrics as well. So if we want to look at, say, the average session duration from each of these countries, we can see that compared to the site average, the US is 24% greater than the site average. And we can look at some of those countries where people don't spend as much time on the site. So now that you understand how to navigate the Google Analytics reports, maybe a quick exercise that you can do is just come in, change the date range, compare it to a previous period, so you can really see the changes that makes in the report.